All right, welcome back, folks. So we're starting back up some other foundational pieces of my routine prior to my legacy building with Ryuga Gotoku Studios' catalog of Like a Dragon games and Judgment series. Today we're gonna start up our regular, something that I've been working on in terms of formatting and how I'm gonna integrate it into my habit formation. It's a game called Osu, or Os, or Os. Now that I think about it, let's think about yeah, we'll go with Os, right? I say Osu a lot. Osu sounds interesting, right? Like the way it's pronounced, but generally speaking, I'd probably go with Os. Formally, it's a contentious point, but formally when you start up this wonderful little application or game, the pronunciation is Os, and Os also flows very well with my last year worth of Japanese exposure. So this game called Os. Now we have a lot to cover, but we'll make it through. We'll try to keep it a little bit brief. It's gonna be quite a long day, the first one, and then we're gonna try to make sure all our other things are going about right. So as customary now, for starting new projects or starting new games and then returning games from long break, which I just recently done a returning remarks for a monsters expedition. More of those are most definitely going to come through at some point. This is another one that I have a long history with. So once again, we're gonna enter a state of making some returning remarks, right? Oops. Returning remarks regarding the game Os. So where should we start? Well, as always, returning remarks. These segments tend to focus on giving some attention and care to acknowledging the developer, focusing on perhaps things that I've gathered from the developer or things in the media covering the developer, and then, make some reflection on the community, and then have my personal motivations, right? My personal motivations or ways that I would like to pay attention to my active motivations on doing what I'm about to do, which I'll discuss in a little bit more. So in terms of developer, we can probably safely say also a publisher. In fact, Os would fit as an indie. Now, this requires even a little bit more deep dive when it comes to the indie scene. Now, I talked about a while ago, we talked about puzzlers, right? Do a monsters expedition as a indie scene darling, right? Puzzlers. So If you're ever curious, my returning remarks about a monster's expedition is a great place. Also, this flows into Alba in a sense because of Monument Valley, right? Or opening remarks regarding what remains of Edith Finch because of Unfinished Swan, right? All this comes around because I'm very drawn to the indie scene. I'm drawn to creators who, in their niche, stick out like sore thumbs, but, right? And they show remarkable resilience in following through on their vision, regardless of whether that coincides with mainstream standardization or popularity and expectations. And these communities have that distinct trade-off of being incredibly closed off and exclusive. However, I am a person who likes to observe and perhaps imitate and try to empathize with these groups, but not necessarily become part of the community. I like observing human behavior, and usually the indie scene offers a lot of niche communities that I would probably seem like a filthy casual, right, on the outside, but that's kind of my hobby. My hobby is observing very isolated communities. Mainstream has very that's where the standardization comes in, right? Standardization creates habit formation, consistency. So does the indie scene. However, the indie scene as a whole is pocketed and punctuated by specific communities, and this is one of them. And usually the indie scene's punctuated communities are exclusive, and the longer they have persist, the more exclusive they become. So the idea is, while the barrier is incredibly high to enter these communities, I don't necessarily desire to enter the communities. I like to study and look and observe the communities as an outsider most of the time. So indie scenes are incredibly gatekeepy. That's why it's the indie scene, right? It's the exclusiveness. And then in contrast to that, mainstream is when you have your conflicts of interest, your overall great inclusiveness. Just a little digression. So we touch upon one of the darlings of indie scene, puzzlers, and then we also touched upon Alba and what remains of Edith Finch for the storytelling ones, right? Storytelling, which usually comes in the form of some walking sim. That's the contemporary phrase that I feel the general audience tend to use nowadays, as opposed to like point and click and other older, less inclusive phrases. And then we had a slight maturity into deck building. But here's where everything comes full circle, right? We gotta connect the dots. It makes things very effective in memory when you connect the dots. So currently, the deck building digression I have is battle bands. Well, there is another, I'm gonna call it a meta layer that's on top of deck building that is indie specific. But it's kind of coming back, but it's often indie specific. And that's the incorporation of music. And beyond that is rhythm. Case in point, the de facto most popularized now example was this year's Hi-Fi Rush. It might be last year, but I'm pretty sure it's somewhere this year. Hi-Fi Rush, it was like a little less would be like the metal game, the heavy metal game, which was actually an offshoot of bullets per minute, which is BPM, right? So when you add extra meta layers, typically music comes at the point and flexibility of theme and a style, I guess the word I would use. I was gonna say stylization. So battle bands happens to be one of them. It's an incorporation of I would call it the second layer, the subgenre of the puzzler foundation, which is largely logic. So when you determine your logic, sometimes you skip over this foundation and leap right into a subgenre, which is deck building. And then another subgenre is actually music. And by music, I mean specifically rhythm games. The thing about rhythm games is it is very elegantly intuitive, right? However, you can take that rhythm and apply logical things to it. So, for example, tapping your keys to the rhythm is a logic-based connection. The rhythm you feel is intuitive. The action you're doing that's associated with the rhythm is not intuitive initially. It is developed by logic. So you tap Z for one beat. That is not something someone inherently connects. Yes, I understand that human beings can, sway and bounce intuitively, but the intellectual ability to associate an action or even a very complex action with something that's intuitive creates this flexibility, the same flexibility that puzzlers offer, right, at its core, which is associating something that you can approach logically and then develop intuition about it. And these are forms of foundational work because rhythm is a foundation. Being able to appreciate rhythm. And then music is ear training. So while puzzlers may exercise a specific type of thing, music is a foundational work too. And what happens is that this makes it very approachable from an indie scene. So often you get a combination of these two quite a bit. So like rhythm layered on top of an action game, Hi-Fi Rush. Rhythm layered on top of a platformer. I'm gonna throw a shout out to a less popular game, but also create a splash, and we're gonna say the Beat Trip series. So the Bit Trip series, sorry. I say beat because I'm thinking music. The Bit Trip series, like Bit Trip Runner, right? So it's an integration of rhythm as a meta layer on top of subgenres like deck building. While battle bands doesn't necessarily incorporate rhythm into deck building, it is using a meta layer of music as the theme to deck building. So it's creating the design theme. And I have seen some very unfortunate, myopic criticisms about and disappointments about battle bands being a deck builder that doesn't incorporate rhythm structure and stuff. It's more of a someone is criticizing what they want rather than its intent, right? In terms of battle bands, the idea of music is the design theme of the deck building. So it is a meta layer placed on top of deck building. It isn't a music game that is a deck builder. Order of operations. If the theme is to build a rhythm game with deck building as a theme, then it's the rhythm that's being represented as cards, like the music being represented as cards. In this case, for the game that we were playing, is a deck builder that has a music theme. So the deck building is themed after music, and in this case, largely things that integrate rock and roll, and hence they're called rock and roll deck building, because rock and roll is the modifier for deck building. No misinterpretation there. However, I draw criticism because there are people who often think inwardly, and generally the bigger scape of mainstream video game end users tend to think inwardly most of the time. So they have my sympathies, right? But I definitely cannot empathize with that ignorance. Anyways, just a little bit for battle bands, because we're still playing battle bands. I have played Bit Trip stuff, Runner and Beat. Bit Trip Beat is another one, right? So let's go. So where does us comes in? Well, us is an indie, free to play. Ooh, yeah, I know. Free to play. That sends shivers through people. But this is an entirely different beast. In fact, indie scene is very different with this term free to play than the mainstream. So we're not talking about mainstream, technically, free to play models. We're talking about an indie free to play models. And what is free to play? Well, we're gonna use a more mysterious word, I would say, or lesser used word, in order to detach from the whole free to play live service association. And we're gonna call it's a freeware. And freeware are beautiful, in my opinion, because freeware is largely, I'm just gonna say largely, it's indie freeware. And here's a inception, we're not an inception. Yeah, here's an inception moment. The very program I'm using to write this is a freeware. It's Krita. And generally, when you think about something that's free, is due to the donations or funding specifically from the community. So you might be thinking, well, what about like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, I suppose. I don't know if that thing is still going. Well, these projects aren't like persistent, and they are pledges. So they are faith, forward faith investments, so interest investments. When I think about freeware, we're thinking more about the level of subscription and like patron backing or supporters, right? And this game, for at least what I gather, is almost entirely a personal funding from the developer / publisher, which we'll go into in a bit, or entirely backed by the community itself. So in a way, this kind of feeds psychologically to the idea that this community is incredibly gated, right? Because over the years, if you become loyal to a brand and you fund it, you effectively become a part founder of this group, and this group creates its equivalent and proportional to the value you placed into it, right? and it creates very strong bonds, incredible loyalties, almost love-hate relationships, even self-abusive relationships are sustainable because of the emotional, financial, and time-oriented investment. These models breed loyalty, and that's very incredibly wholesome from an outside standpoint. Breaking into the community can be incredibly difficult in this case. Generally speaking, when I mean by incredibly difficult, I mean relatively difficult when it comes to comparing it to something that's mainstream, right? Because it would be mainstream if it wasn't difficult. So that's one of the trade-offs for this like subscription patron like system, much like how YouTube operates with content creators. Very less so with Twitch. It's a different beast when it comes to Twitch. So just to give you a foundation of what the OSU, because that's going to play a big part in terms of the OS community. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the developer and the publisher / publisher. And I think largely they do appropriately now go by the OS development team, right? No, very right on top of the head, you know. I can't spell development team, just to include all the people. I would say it's on the uppers now of 10 people plus, maybe 3 or 4 programmers that I can think of based on the GitHub. So they have a GitHub roadmap for something that is related to my timing of what I'm going to do today. But largely it would be an incredible disservice to not mention Dean. Oh no, it's difficult for me to remember his name because he goes by a handle most of the time, or people refer to him as Dean Herbert, affectionately and endearingly referred to as Peppy. This is his handle that he used. In fact, I think it's generally abbreviated PPY, right? Peppy. So this guy is the original author, largely programmed this specific iteration of OS, and self-published, eventually collaborated with other developers. I don't know what the employment structure and stuff is like for this, but Peppy is the originator, still works on it. In fact, just a shout out to Peppy. He actually has a Twitch channel where he codes. It's a coding channel that shows what he's working on OS, right? It's not and this game is a persistent game. Like, it's a game based on performance. So we'll go into that a little bit. So we talked a little bit about the community. The community is growing incredibly. Interestingly, representation is representation is pretty inclusive, I would say. I would say relatively more inclusive. However, while it's more inclusive, there can be a lot of conflict of interest. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then my personal history, we'll go into that at the end. Okay, so what is OS? So OS is a rhythm game, right? And it is patterned by a game, I would say it is worth mentioning its inspiration, which is a company Innis or Inis, something like that. It's a Japanese company that put out a game by the name Us. Tatake Oyendan? But it went by the same name. So, Peppy took that, like, inspiration and created something really big, like, through many faithful years. And we're talking about Us was first introduced in 2007, so 16 years ago. And then just a little bit in 2015, Us Laser was introduced, and in this current state is still technically in a state of beta. We'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about personal things and when I have thoughts about the Us lifestyle, I suppose, that I have. So rhythm games, typically, so there are actually broken down into 4 modes. We have standard, mania, catch the beat, and taiko. So, I mean, I'm no stranger to taiko, right? Taiko is patterned after taiko. And we did do a little bit of that in Like a Dragon, right? Taiko was included in one of the Sega arcades section among some of the time. Catch the Beat would be I would say I would owe it Catch the Beat more to the mobile industry, where an object falls and you try to catch it, right? And then Mania would be the arrows, right? And interestingly enough, this and this had some semblance in Like a Dragon. So trying to connect all the dots. All my experiences are there are connections, and these connections make these details very unforgettable. Now, standard though is arguably the highlight of what I would imagine the original Tatake Os game was, and that is more of an aim oriented. So the closest thing I would say is it's kind of like how a first person points at the screen, right? So one may say there is some overlap to a lot of first person perspective mainstream genre. So things like FPSs in a sense of first person shooters, right? As opposed to first person perspective, right? So what happens is you combine the idea of tapping to a rhythm or tapping to a beat that's displayed on an object as a circle, and then you point to that. So an element in combination of aim and tapping. And we won't go into any more than that. It'll be very apparent as I go and practice, because this is the mechanics part. We're really focused or more interested in returning remarks regarding some interesting things that I want to talk about regarding the community and development. So Peppy is kind of elusive. He's kind of an elusive dev, but he does interact in an interview sense and even work along with community members. So the OS development team does recruit end users over time. So there are some very prominent players and users that ultimately end up being part of a wider OS development team. So Peppy does have interactions and interviews with both content creators or representatives of the community, and even work with some of them. I have to say, it's other than that, there aren't too much details about him. He's a very elusive, by elusive I mean I'm gonna use the word professional. So it's very business. One thing about the design of this game that is quite elegant, in my opinion, is it really does it's very dynamic. And what I mean by that is Peppy has this way of taking feedback a lot. Like, it's incredibly I can't stress how such a mutual relationship with developing the game and balancing his vision with his community vision. I think that's one thing to highlight. And if you saw the interviews and stuff, incredibly well spoken too. It's no need to understate him, but he is your developer that acts very professional, takes feedback, have a working relationship with their community. It's just kind of like the golden thing, you know, all the above. So that's what I gather. I don't have any actual interactions with him, just arm's length, right? But there are very exuberant community members. Now, that leads us to my generalized thoughts about the community. I would say, generally speaking, the community is self-selected. So there is a little bit of self-selection. So let's talk about, there's quite a lot of self-selection actually. Like most indie groups, it comes with self-selection. So we talked about how the puzzler selects for a specific type of individual and then storytellers and whatnot. So do rhythm music games with a specific theme, right? This is dominated by Japanese otakus, right? So I say Japanese otaku culture, and not in the way that a Japanese person uses the word otaku, but in a way Americanized or westernized, but largely Americanized use. And that's liking the Japanese culture. And the reason why I say that is there is some fluidness, but it is dominated by an anime presentation, or the manga culture, right? However, disproportionately, due to becoming more and more inclusive, some of the content creators and community are more classified as Japanese otakus because they don't necessarily require the meta appreciation for anime and manga, just the art, the concept of Japanese art, as opposed to literally watching anime or reading manga. That isn't necessarily inclusive of really, really big influencers. So this is a big selection, right? So I'm no stranger to this because of Like a Dragon. It's no coincidence that I become drawn to something that has a self-selection for this. And then the other self-selection is another big self-selection is performance. And performance in the sense of execution. So this is gonna be a little chicken or the egg, but generally speaking, I would say for the most part, the egg part, right? The self-selection part is due to the greater viralness and sensation of performance and execution that attracts and grows and self-selects for the community. So we're talking about things like this game, rhythm games tend to focus on accuracy and debatably accuracy. We're talking about with reflection to the greater community that is the internet, right? So this is a game that is primarily dominated by accuracy, consistency. Accuracy and consistency are not the same thing. I hope I won't have to require to talk about the difference between consistency and accuracy, or even better, precision. Precision is the classic word that contrasts with accuracy and does a lot with science. So accuracy and precision. And sometimes we would kind of say aim, right? Aim, but aim technically would be a different component. But generally speaking, the performance is about being good at something. So specialization, a specialized skill, especially a ranked specialized skill, right? So this is where it self-selects for people who are looking for validation. And this validation is drawn by things like social media. It comes with all the ups and downs and the trade-offs. So this is a really big one. So when you think about individuals who play these types of games, it would largely include people who are looking for validation. And they often are looking for validation through a specialized skill that is ranked. Ranked being it is relative to a pool of people that is objectively standardized. So ranked, in order to rank something, it must require an objective metric, some sort of standardized way of comparing yourself. And these individuals are looking for validation based on that rank system, right? And the word I would say that isn't described in this like really loopy way is the word competitive. And I'm putting competitive in quotes because there's self-competition, there's let's say inward competition, and outward competition. So in this case, that's a big self-selection. The selection is competitive. Sometimes a self-selection could just be inward, and sometimes it can be outward. But in this case, inclusively, the us community is a competitive community. It's a mindset that one should understand and be self-aware for the self before integrating or trying to break into the us community, right? So that is one that I will have a touching point when we reach my personal investment. So I touch upon some of these things. So Japanese fandom, right? Japanese culture fandom, sorry. Japanese culture fandom. Performance, right? Performance-based motivation. And competition. Competition doesn't necessarily have to be performance-based, right? So, because you can be creative-based. So these are probably the hallmarks. And then social media friendly in a sense, because it's performance-based. What else can I describe? Largely this. Oh, another probably a good mention that is very important is there is an age gap. And what I mean by age gap, you take the world's population and you take this, they're usually younger. And that's what makes this this is very relevant to me because, as usual, I'm very interested in the education, the upbringing, the behavioral management and emotional intelligence and intellectual intelligence of youth. And this game typically is younger, and they are usually transitioning adults. That might not be the word, that word might not be very clear. Transitioning adults is what I mean by they're young adults heading to adulthood, right? So typically you have to get into the mindset of what it's like. The reason why I call it an age gap is generally speaking, when these young adults end up transitioning to adulthood, they're in a process where they will actively turn over. So this game, while it is performance-based, a performance-based game requires like foundational work. So it's a foundational game, so it requires consistent upkeep, right? Consistent upkeep. So it's not a video game where it's not performance-based, which is a great example would be completion-based. Completion-based games tend to be, say, a storyteller, like a walking sim or a puzzler, right? This is a consistent upkeep. However, it's worth noting that this game is geared towards younger adults who will have a transitioning period to adulthood. So the community base is more actively turning over. So one of the struggles, I would say, or maybe not struggles, or even impressive in this case, is that the US community appears to be growing despite actively turning over players. So not necessarily facing the same obstacle as those who have completionist games, where they have to develop new games over time to retain the audience or maybe adjust to the audience that interests. This one is more of a habit formation that requires daily training or weekly training. However, because of that requirement and the target audience that's attracted to this game, adulthood tends to create turnover because of increasing responsibilities or other types of habits that take higher priority. Despite of all of that, the game's ability to grow makes it a centerpiece for someone like myself to observe, right? if they are constantly a source of attracting younger audience, what is it about the elements and things that are increasingly attracting younger audience? And what makes this an interesting case study, in my opinion, both psychologically and maybe objectively by the numbers, is the idea that this may be a reflection of a greater self-selection on the internet. And it's quite elegant, actually. It coincides with a lot of my observations about obstacles, maybe behavioral idiosyncrasies, right, involving youth online, and how they, perhaps the things they don't do and do, and the way they solve problems, develop habits, all can be observed quite a bit from an extension of playing, as in participating in this game, literally and figuratively. So that's what interests me about the community, right? They're a competitive community that seeks performance, have an active, inherent attachment to Japanese culture, and I would say music as a concept, but as an intuitive concept. So when I say music as an intuitive concept, is music as a mechanic, not as a creative process. So I did go into a little bit of that, the idea of puzzlers, right, as a contrast, is operated on a game design based on logic as opposed to intuition, primarily. And it's a little bit of both. It's always a little bit of everything. However, puzzlers, in contrast, prioritize logic to teach critical thinking and other processes that don't come with intuition. It's to develop intuition. In terms of music is often a rhythm game, especially us. Rhythm games tend to emphasize intuitive mechanics, as in mechanics that are very core to the entry point. So if you don't feel like you have that intuition, it becomes a barrier to it, right? So those who play this game have enough intuitive association with these desires that I've listed here, at least these driving forces. These are like the top 5 driving forces to want to play this game. And one of them is music as a concept, as an intuitive mechanic. So tapping on time, feeling the music, enjoying the music that makes you want to tap to it. So often music as a concept would, as a intuitive mechanic, would often involve integrating things of performance, because performance is objective, right? So this lies in one of the big crux, the trade-offs. And when we talk about music as a mechanic, as an intuitive mechanic, there are very specific things, but one comes out shining at the top, and that's speed. The idea of mechanical speed is very intuitive, right? It's hard to go fast. And what happens is, this is what I mean by music as a mechanic. So, and not to mislead individuals who want to play Osu as a creative, as a music creatively. So there's a very big difference between a game designed with music as a creative thing, for example, battle bands, right? Or what's a oh no, I need a game where I'll do like a really out of the box shout out. It's a game called Metronomicon. I'll let anyone think. If you know what this game is, you have my respect. It's an older indie game. But the idea is, or like, let's use a more contemporary one, like Crypt of the Necrodancer. I mean, you could even say Hi-Fi Rush. So the idea is when music is a creative process, you actually create, often it's the reverse. The idea of the music was created to have a mechanic revolve around, as opposed to the music serving as a mechanic, which often leads to things like, and I'm kind of describing something, my personal relationship with the game itself, which is a high noise ceiling. Constant acceleration. Some might even say the word hard. So what happens is, what you lose is dynamics. So you don't have dynamics. You lose musical clarity. Just pauses. You kind of lose variety in songwriting. And what I'm saying is, when music serves as a mechanic, it causes a homogenation. It homogenizes what is used, right? Because if it's a mechanic, it has to serve parameters that lead to performance. What I'm saying here is not to mislead someone who is an enjoyer of creative music, but generally speaking, if music serves as a mechanic, it leads to very specific types of music. And in this case, the parameters self-enrich for things like Japanese music, specifically like Japanese pop / tech, right? Metal music, heavy metal. I wouldn't say all metal music. EDM, right? Well, it's kind of like this. And then we have sort of like hardcore, like just really, really hardcore stuff. And what happens is, because these elements, and they're very specific pop tech stuff, tend to lead mechanically. So when you have, say, music that is mainstream, right? Mainstream doesn't necessarily predicate on performance, like maximizing performance. When you want to create mainstream, it's about average performance with a high range, so that you include slower individuals, right? And I don't mean by intellectual proficiency. We're talking about those who appreciate slower pace and then faster pace, right? So it's not ironically dynamic in this way, nor is it dynamic in a creative way. It tends to be enriched for very specific things. So if you're a music enjoyer, it can be a pre-selection. And it's inherently motivated by the idea that US is a performance self-selection. Like most indie games, and especially Peppy, one of the great things about Peppy that I highlighted is his open communication and mutual relationship with the community. And because of that, it also reflects performance metrics that is reflected by the community's preferences. So inherently, because of that, it creates a feedback loop to what type of music, what type of specific things, and that creates specialization. So it lowers inclusiveness and it enriches for niche. So that's the ongoing trade-off and balancing act that us has classically have for the longest time. How do you introduce us to a bigger audience? Do you want to? What is the emotional reasoning and the intellectual reasoning? Well, for myself, obviously, I'm an inclusive person. So I would find it there's a lot of high interference of conflict of interest to be someone who wants to integrate into the US community. To be part of the US community excommunicates you from all the inclusive communities. Because naturally the trade-off for being incredibly loyal, hardcore, performance-oriented is that you become less and less receptive to everything else. And the idea is you have in life, a person has 2 or 3 of these incredibly specialized communities. Me, for example, I resonate with the scientific community. Like, that will be incredibly difficult for someone like myself to navigate outside of it. And us is one of them when it comes to a gaming community. This community is incredibly strong, vibrant, passionate when you fit the community. And it's kind of full circle, because if you think about this type of community I'm describing, I'm also talking about the Japanese community. It's all self-feedback. It's lots and tons of self-selection. Those who resonate with the Japanese culture, but not literally living in the Japanese culture, also has become an embodiment and extension of that community, as in reflection of its cultures, its cultural idiosyncrasies, right? Its cultural stereotypes and values and whatnot permeates the US community. It's a tight-knit group, loyal to its identity, for better or for worse, accepting and tolerant of all the conflicts of interest that they have literally with the game. So for example, a classic thing about performance is maintenance and decay, even more so than progress. So you form this incredibly acceptant, tolerant, but even possibly self-abusive relationship with something, because it's inherently a community that's reinforced by exclusivity. And what it does on first impression is it becomes incredibly repulsive. As in, let's do a little deep cut here slightly about breaking into a closed community, like for example Japan. As earnestly as I can be and respectfully, the trade-off is when you try to break into a closed community, there are things that when the community becomes so enriched on its own values that there are things that you can't possibly transcend. So for the Japanese community, you cannot become a Japanese person when you are not a Japanese person. So there's that thing, right? Us is a little bit above that. However, it's become incredibly enriched so much that even that becomes a barrier. So what I mean by that is all the values that I'm highlighting becomes the barrier to being part of the US community. For one, it's very, very tiresome and trying to be someone who wants to play rhythm games but not necessarily be into metal music or hardcore music or even Japanese music, right? So it's not a deal breaker per se. It's a topic that is normalized and comes up every time. So in order to be part and recognized as the US community, like prominent person, you have to seek performance. You have to want performance, and performance is a topic. So it's kind of like going into Japan and not talking about ramen, or going into Japan and not talking about temples or anything Japan related, right? Japanese related. It's a topic that you must acknowledge and know that it will come up. And acceptance comes from empathy in those things. And that's where I come in to the personal things. We gotta wrap this up a little bit because I'm going over an hour now. And I'll talk about this as we go, because my personal take on this is I am not part of the US community, right? I'm not part of the US community. I'm an outsider looking to participate in like habit formation. I love the idea that us selects for performance-based youth, or I recognize it as a strength. So, however, I also see that I can apply, or I'm going to use the word experiment very loosely, experiment different strategies to introduce generalized skills to specialists. But what I mean is, for the vast majority of kids in the US community, they are specialists. They're ones that have the mindset of a specialist. And the skill itself, because of early specialization, they are unable to adapt, generally speaking. Adaptation is given up. There's low adaptation. And because of that, life skills take a hit. So the idea is, my personal relationship is I'm looking at habit formation. I'm looking at the properties of what makes this such a attractive model for youth. For myself, I'm using it just as that. It's a habit formation. It's a thing that I enjoy because it's something I can generally practice. Right? Not a performance-based person. So, to why I mention all these digressions all these things about the community is I can't be part of the Osu community unless this community has a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift towards what would be required. I would say in order for me to be part of the us community, right, there would require a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift would be towards creativity that has subjective metrics or subjective minded merit system. And that is very vague, but what I'm saying is that it becomes a supportive system or supportive relationship that is detached from an objective ranking system. And in a way to focus is more like a greater emphasis on individual upkeep. That would be more like a completionist standpoint. Or you can even integrate some statistics like cumulative statistics emphasis. This does exist though. Cumulative statistics, and that's in the way of your profile. But your profile doesn't necessarily, it's not center stage. It's not something that's emphasized, right? So it requires a paradigm shift in at least these priorities in order for me to feel like I can resonate with the us community, which I can't because that does not exist right now. And they're more or less the reason are all the above. It's a combination of all the above. I am not culturally homogenous, right? So it's not just Japanese culture. So it's not bad or good, it's just I have a conflict of interest. If I were to give up my conflict of interest, I would become someone else. And that someone else is at odds. So these are non-negotiable, binary, like almost binary things. It's hard to be both at the same time because if you're being one, it's detracting from the other. So things like cultural homogeneity is one of them, because for me, there's something greater than just the Japanese culture. I really love the Japanese culture. Don't get me wrong. I would argue I'm an otaku myself, but I might even be as bold as saying I might actually know more about the Japanese culture than the even increasingly homogenous understanding of the Japanese culture. Like what I'm saying is sometimes to understand a culture, you need to understand other cultures. The human condition is often a balance of generalized knowledge and specialized knowledge. So when one becomes incredibly homogenized to a specific image of the Japanese culture, one would start to lose sight of the greater Japanese culture. And without an understanding of other cultures, you cannot develop a relative to this. So what happens then is what happens ironically to a lot, especially low-key, those who attack, right? Sort of attack Americans for ethnocentrism, when inherently, and here's the poetic irony here, in order to attack a very specific culture with ethnocentrisity, it requires that person to be ethnocentric themselves. It's kind of a paradox. But if one can easily attack another and generalize another culture for being like self-absorbed or egocentric, it takes an egocentric person to do that, because arguably they are probably proficient at seeing that or want to see it. Historically or statistically, the reason why this is, I can say this, is because statistically Americans are likely the most diverse in the population makeup, and I'm a product of that. And my hyper focus also makes me less loyal. So there are trade-offs for being someone who's not culturally homogenous. It's very difficult to navigate whether I feel I can empathize with someone who's very passionate about not being ethnocentric or etc. It's a mixed bag. It's all of the above. So one thing I can't resonate with, but try to sympathize with very, very wholeheartedly, is I find it incredibly endearing that someone loves a singular specialized culture so much that it legitimately permeates even their behavior and their selection of games, like us, and their behavior selection for performance and where they get their self-affirmation. It's quite endearing and passionate to watch the US community grow and mature and go into turnover and change, but inherently it's so self-contained. Like it oozes Asian hardcore Japanese / even Chinese type of mentality. It's self-selected. And one would say that on a different world and on a different planet, or maybe a different universe, if I was born not American, I suppose, I would resonate really, really well with the US community, because it would be all about performance. It would all about the objective metrics. It's about being number one. You know, it's about hard practice and getting those rank points, working out that stuff. And I do kind of love that. And that's where I come in. The thing that I can resonate, so I've been saying all the things I don't resonate with, what I can resonate with, and I'm going to do this starting this whole month, is the idea of forming a habit, being consistent about it, practice, right? So data keeping, appreciating music as a mechanic, and just developing a specialized skill, just developing a skill, right? Or even retraining a skill. And in this case, it's more the latter than the former. At this current moment, my relationship with Osu is, it's actually one of the oldest games, both time and chronology, that I played. Oldest and longest. probably one of the longest. We're gonna say it's on and off for 4+ years now, right? 4+ years now. But the last time I did what I'm about to do was a year ago, to this date. It's actually December 2022. And in terms of like performance or ranking, I guess I'm in the 80th percentile and up, which is where I usually cut off at. My specialization tends to cut off at 80th percentile. This figure might be a little up and down because the pool of players have changed yearly, if not like bi-monthly. So I would say I'm in the 80th percentile already, and that involves on and off more than 4 years, and that's what I like about it. I resonate with that. What I don't resonate and I have sympathies for is that I can break and establish habits whenever I want, because I'm practiced in generalizing. And data keeping comes from many sources. So what all this encompasses, this is not a specialized skill that I have. This is practice to the point that it is a generalized skill. And in a way, this leads my segment into my general interest of why I'm covering all of this. It's the idea that one day, games like us will create communities of young adults that have the foundations of specialists. However, they lack any form of generalization. And what happens to lacking generalization is poor coping, poor adapting, poor interpersonal skills. And what I mean by that is even on the professional level, even if there's someone who does reach out, they perform relatively specialized compared to other people. So like even as a professional, their critical thinking, right, creativity is incredibly restricted to a host community. So even their behavioralism. So you're basically not dynamic. And all of this, why is this important to me? Well, general well-being. There's a very, very prominent word here, right? That I can't seem to write properly. General well-being. It's not specialized well-being. So the biggest thing that I can say is there's a lack of mental wellness, sustainability. And one would say like, well, it happens elsewhere too. Like, what about sports, right? And you can argue, because this is relevant, esports, right? Because us is a digital game. Or like, what about music and, like record labels and whatnot? Yes, certainly. Certainly, you could make that argument. But here's one thing that this doesn't have, or this enables even more. This is more prominent, in my opinion. This mental wellness sustainability, the decrease in mental wellness sustainability, and of course, by extension, it decreases physical sustainability, is greater because go all the way back to the beginning, it's a freeware. Because it's freeware, it comes with trade-offs. All the things I talked about, that line of logic about the community, the developers and stuff, it creates a strong feedback loop. It's a positive feedback loop. So that means it's incredibly accessible. And it's incredibly accessible to specific target audience. So you see that it's what all of this leads to. Like Peppy is a reflection as well of it. He's very dedicated, he's very selective and specialized in what he does. He communicates with the community, which feeds back on this specialization. So Oz is incredibly great now at selecting for very specific type of people, very self-selected, very indie. And because of the sustainability, the non-sustainability of performance-based objective tasks in the as it consumes this person's life, like a youth, right? It leaves less and less room for any other form of dynamic skill building. And because of that, all of those become unpracticed as a trade-off for being incredibly specialized. What happens is it creates a huge self-selection or what I would say is incredibly proficient, if not extraordinary addiction to specialization. And one thing that life skills do not do is specialize. Life skills is dynamic. It also requires, paradoxically, or maybe ironically, maybe it's counterintuitive for this specific community, but it requires consistency, which in upkeep. But it is the other thing. It is consistently dynamic, not consistently static. But that's where it lies in trouble, right? And I want to bridge this gap, basically. In the future, I actually think this is a reflection of live service models as well. Live service models is even above this design. Live service model predicates on self-selection that creates habit formation and static specialization. And what happens is it destroys, or not really destroys, it trades off. Basically, when you spend more time here, you're not spending more time at life skills. Remaining dynamic, being consistently open to changing, right? So to me, this offers a great resource to maybe understand how they process all of this stuff, right? All this understanding how the proficiency, the addiction, and all that happens, I can use this to make life skills more approachable. And one of the ways I could really do that, since I'm not a person who has access to like 1,000 people or 10,000 people or whatnot, is that I use myself. So what I do is I participate and try to empathize by literally participating. And then I ask myself, how do I get back to life skill development? So the whole motivation for playing Osu constantly, or Os, right? Or even any live service game for that matter, is I want to go back and forth. And test things. Just like, how do I, for example, test things? How do I walk away? You know? How do I take a specialized skill and generalize it into a life skill? The opposite is true also. So those who are incredibly generalized fail to see how specialized skills are relevant. So what I mean is a dialogue that I have on the opposite side, just to contrast, because we need to get some relative. It's not a one-sided argument. It's not even a two-sided argument most of the time. It's kind of like 3 or 4, classically. The opposite side is I enter a lot of dialogue with teachers, educators, just like, I'm gonna say passionate therapists, not professional therapists, but just people who like to focus on these things, find that this does not contribute. Their generalized skills, their generalized like dynamics on adapting life skills do not translate to video games. And you cannot extract that either. So it's the opposite happens too. I enter these conversations a lot. Like, for example, I don't get it. Why would you want to spend your time playing this video game and getting good at this video game? It's not going to make you better at life, like real life stuff. It's like, well, it's not if you think about it at the surface level. Yes, for sure, because you haven't done it, right? It's the quintessential argument for both sides. You don't know that your us habits can be translated into life skills for the very same reason. When you are connected with a self-selecting, self-feedback group like us, you cannot form the connection with life skills since you are deficient in it. You have not dedicated a lot of time to it. So you inherently don't think about it in the context of life skills. And in the opposite sense, someone who's incredibly generalized is generally an educator. So what you can see here is I'm picking a very specific group because I believe it represents that other group that I resonate with, which are teachers, educators, therapists, advisors, consultation, those who specify or specialize, ironically, specialize in problem solving. Scientists, right? They exercise interdisciplinary needs. Even a scientist that specialize have to, even refractory, like with the conflict of interest, have to be interdisciplinary, have to require other insights, be it through another expert or collaborating with someone, it is absolutely paramount. So these individuals cannot see how, or find it very difficult, that something as abstract as clicking circles somehow can build the foundation and be applied to acquiring life skills. It requires I would say, a bit of mental gymnastics. So, and I'm not talking about like someone like myself who's like in the middle, because I would say the vast majority, for now, right now, I still argue that the vast majority is a mix. It's a hybrid, right? Because I want to believe in my life, at least in my current generation, that the vast majority of people are still doing the balancing act and being largely content and happy with how they can dynamically shift between the two perspectives. What I use to emphasize are that I, as a person in between, I am exposed to these two extremes to know the difference, right? If I'm always hanging out in the middle with my other peeps, it's very difficult to see big differences. That's kind of like the bane of science, right? How do you see the effects of a pharmaceutical product? Well, you target the worst case scenario and see if there's a beneficial. If it's someone who's modulated and healthy, generally the effect would either be unnoticeable or the delta have to be incredibly consistent to the point where it can be practically unachievable. Like the resolution is not big enough. So for me, I'm highlighting here where there's an exaggeration of teachers and educators and even therapists that lack experiences that would probably enable them to be even more creative, even more passionate about how to reach their patients or their clients. In a way, the ones that work really well are the ones who kind of specialize their generalizable skills, as in a teacher that specifically teaches something. So that specific teaching allows them to gravitate their time to participating in that activity too. And that's why I like playing Osu. I play I play video games because it's a medium that I like to specialize in. So I specialize in the whole gamifying things because the internet does it really well. Generative AI does it even better, scarily even better, and I'm having a hard time keeping up with that. But just the idea of the internet attempting to objectify human behavior, just constantly objectifying human behavior, is creating a wealth of knowledge that is relevant to the people online. And then the people offline, it's on the other side. Offline people are faced with generalized obstacles, generalized conflicts of interest. So their skills inherently do that. Rarely do they specialize. And you could take an example from the internet. So low-key, this is just low-key a slight hot take. If you take a teacher who spends most of the time offline and get them to get very good at a puzzle game and make them play like 20 or 30 puzzle games, they may develop a perspective in a creative way that may make them resonate with, we're not going to kid ourselves here, the vast majority of the youth that they're probably educating. So how does a teacher become more successful at engaging their youth? Well, you might want to start by actually experiencing what the youth is mostly exposed to. So if I were to ever step in a classroom again, like for a seminar, my perspective, due to my experience or need to play video games can be used to my advantage. And I earnestly believe in the most humble way I can say it. I believe that I am far more effective at engaging younger adults while teaching a complex, generalized life skill like critical thinking or communication due to my experience and observations, both experience and observation. So literally participating and spectating in a specialized community, which us represents that. Neverwinter Online represents that. ESO2 NGS represents that. In fact, they're all would be consistently referred to as a live service game model, because us might not seem like a live service game model, but the community produces content. They map, they introduce packs. There's a revolving around of content. That is technically live service. Live service isn't just simply a business model, although I tend to hyper focus on that because that's what mainstream people focus on, the business side of things. But emotionally and psychologically, emotionally and intellectually, it's a live service model. It's part of what makes live service models effective. Rolling content. No need for early upfront investment or a leap of faith. There's no, it's a deceptively small investment over time. That's what makes it a live service. That's what life skills are. Well, here's one really big and final hot take. Live service models are so effective from people outside of the system, generalized knowledge, like business owners and largely business owners, that they operate outside of the system, and they can see that in the system, that is a platform, the internet, is constantly reinforcing specialized knowledge and specialized skills. They become increasingly ignorant to self-awareness and other types of coping mechanisms and the life skills necessary to understand their own addictions that are being legitimately exploited. But they're voluntarily exploiting them per se because they make the choice. But I feel like a lot of times that can be a very sticky situation, because if a specialized person is unaware, especially unself-aware, right, lacking the self-awareness of what is being exploited about them, that would cross some ethical boundaries. So then we lead into the whole controversial topic about the predatory nature of live service models and monetization. Well, frankly speaking, it's also unintentional on the business side of things, because we're talking about two different worlds where they don't cross in empathy or intellectual even. Businessmen technically specialize in dynamics because their business is constantly a dynamic problem, but they don't specialize in playing a video game or playing or using the product that they actually introduce. So all that stuff is at the end user. So at some point, this has got a bridge. I don't know a lot about business. That's not my area of specialties, I suppose. If there's anything I specialize in, is, I would say, generally speaking, communication and largely learning, right? Learning, communication, and I would say education, but a lot of times I wouldn't use that word because it involves semantics. It involves intellectual information, which that education is first and foremost learning. So I would say I specialize in helping people with the learning process and communication. And that does involve a little bit of psychology, emotional intelligence, and whatnot, and personal experience with it. I can't tell you how to be a great artist because, well, I only do art like every once in a while, or a musician or something. But video games, I think I've gotten, I would like to say I have sufficient experiences. One of the things I've done in really earlier, like near the tail end of times when I was in the classroom, was to integrate video games into my discussions. It almost captivates the kids these days in order to frame what you're trying to teach, what you're trying to solve in a context that they can resonate with. And that's the human condition. Human condition, right? Number one, or one of the ones, empathy is a goated teaching method. And we're not even talking about one-way teaching, like the students and teacher. We're talking about both. If you can establish empathy with what your students are experiencing, and the students then can often establish an empathetic link with the teacher. And yes, this does break down some potential ethical concerns or like bias concerns about like professionalism, and it's a heavy balance. But what happens is it becomes a very effective way at exchanging information and communication. And in fact, it even allows tolerance for miscommunication. Human condition, empathy. All right? Yeah. So we got one last thing to talk about, and I'm probably not going to do one of the things today. It's fine. You know, I love talking about this stuff, especially in terms of video games. So the plan now is, well, a year ago, I did this thing called burst and stamina training. Right? So I'm actually gonna attempt to, it was a 30-day thing. 30-day thing, because I started like on the first week of December. First week of December. It was like the 5th-ish. So I just counted 30 days. But this time, it's December 1st. So we're going 31 days. And what I did was, the early days, there's a problem with OS. OS has a problem, right? The first thing, a lot of things that were set here that I'm carrying over. I like to go through yearly like bouts of rotation because it helps me establish habits, walk away from habits, do the whole thing, right? So one of the things is DMCA, right? And copyright music. So as much as I would love to shower all the people with money, I can't. I'm not that kind of a person who has those resources. But what early days were is we found I filtered for muted audio, right? Muted VODs, and then have to make sure they pass YouTube, right? And this is even before, if ever, I become monetized, right? Which would mean that these videos are non-monetized by default. Probably. Right? So that's an ever-present problem, personally. But outwardly, it's a very empathetic problem. As in, I don't see it as a problem, but just a state of things that will happen with a music rhythm game. But for the general purpose of education, I know. What is educational about me just playing a video game? Well, it's the whole thing. It's me doing a 31-day exercise habit, the construction, and the platform. Like, that's why I record this, because it's for education for myself and anyone who's interested, right? So a lot of times when it comes to DMCA and copyright, it's all about the loss in profits and the gain in profits of another person, organization. However, one of the exceptions tend to be educational purposes. And I'm not suggesting that this is for educational purposes. My intent is to use this for posterity and legacy. Just to, these two words I use very frequently. Legacy is everything before me, what I leave behind. And posterity, when I mean legacy, is everything prior to me. And then posterity is everything moving forward. So this is self-education. And it's always been predominantly self-education for myself. I record these things for that. However, I make them publicly available because they can be inspirational, right? Which is a meta layer, an upper layer of doing things for self-education, for self-learning. And that's the idea. Not that this will circumvent educational purpose will not circumvent the DMCA thing. So as I'm going through this a year ago, I set up a set of burst stamina training. This is gonna be familiar to OSU players. And I remove the ones that get muted VODs, and then I am gonna attempt to see if they pass YouTube. And I'll load them up from a year ago. It's very poetic that it's a year ago. I'm a very cyclic person, right? I do my projects on specific months, and yearly at some point they rotate in a yearly manner. So now we have 31 days, and we are going to use a curated list of tracks. And no, it's not going to be like some dynamic approach where I just play random songs and get slapped with DMCA, right? That kind of thing. It's a very curated list, and it's about habit formation. So we're bootstrapping, sort of. Bootstrapping. And it's stamina oriented, so we're gonna put a time limit. And I'm thinking we have to fill this one out still. I'm thinking like it's probably gonna be 30 minutes to an hour. Eventually, at the end of these sessions, I will do music appreciation because I want to integrate something else that I do later. After last year, after this thing, I did another experiment where we do feature artists. And we did a few of them. Let's shout out to some of the feature artists. And what's a feature artist? Just as a throw out. So Peppy and Co. I feel like instead of calling it the US development team, I will refer to the US development team as, oh no, we can't say Pepco because that's PepsiCo. We're gonna say Peppy and Co, right? That's kind of funny. So Peppy and Co typically reach out, I guess, to artists who gets their music featured on it. So it's more like a semi-free to use kind of thing. So from my experience, shout out to some of these feature artists that I've done, right, previously, which I will upload at some point. Faint, Mimi, Ramses. Just to name a few, because I don't remember off the top of my head now. But what happens is there are very specific tracks that serve as music for beat maps, right? Beat maps for the game. So I will probably integrate that into the ends after my bootstrapping. So this is training because I have to retrain. It is physically taxing. Very specific, and that's hand movements. Secondarily would be like eyes, right? And then even then is mental acuity. It tends to tank for me after a while. So it is taxing. So this requires training and retraining. So this is a retraining process. So after that, we'll do like maybe 30 minutes to an hour of a feature artist. And it could be a repeat, or there are quite a long list of feature artists, and this is ever growing. Now, I don't know, there is a lot of red tape when it comes to record labels and whatnot, because there can even be miscommunications between the artists, what they own, and what their record label owns. However, I would say it's ever growing, and to me, I do feel that Peppy and Co. kinda it at the moment the record is quite consistent at navigating this problem. So like usually what I mean is it's usually fine, like basically consent use, at least in the context of us and possibly even social media exposure. And what I mean by that is maybe fair use where it's transformative. And for myself, when I was doing these feature artists, it's largely commentary. I like to reflect on, you know, my commentary usually involves psychology, right? But I also have a background in music as well. Some theory, actually mostly theory, some personal experience like the violin, although very out of practice, some guitar work, vocals, right? And then obviously this is not restricted to English or not restricted by culture, right? So this I would make the argument that is transformative. Regardless, I fully respect when someone mutes these VODs or claim the copyright. I'll write everything in the description. If suddenly there's a video that has absent audio, generally I write the copyright claim, where it was, maybe it's not even there anymore, when it was cut out, in the description. And it's already happened a couple times already with Sega and Sega in Like a Dragon series, and Sega again, but for PSO2 NGS, Phantasy Star Online 2. Interesting enough for both of them. And then OS has quite a few already, even from this set a year ago. I leave them in. If that section is cut out, it's gonna stay cut out. If it's gonna be muted, it's gonna be muted. The idea is that I am not circumventing this. I'm not gonna overlay some other music there. I think it offers a wonderful live record and experience of what it's like to be working with the current medium, right? I don't want to remove what it's not, what it isn't there, or like add what is not there and what it isn't there, or what it could be there, right? It's about acknowledging and accepting that if you want to mute the VOD, if you want me to take down the video, I'll make a video about it and acknowledge that this is just how things work at the moment. I'm not an expert. I can't tell the motivation of things, but it is part of the experience that I have. And I will tell you how I did it and what are the results. You'll likely know what the results is because you'll see the results, and then I can effectively explain it. And I'm explaining it now that moving forward, I have strayed away from recording us, uploading us, playing us for all these reasons. The community, because I don't resonate with the community, so I need to find and build a different type of way to sustain us. And I described some of that. The DMCA policy, the music. I absolutely love people who make music. Like, it goes without saying, I can't even express how more colorful life is with people who make music. But I can't possibly empathize with their desire to make lots of money and the record labels making lots of money. I'm not a businessman. And then video games fall under that category because it has music. And then artwork falls in because video game has artwork too, and artwork, right? So all of that, like, if I made a piece of picture, I can't empathize why I would be angry that someone else copied it and basically use it as their own. I can't resonate with that. But I absolutely sympathize with the idea that someone worked really hard and then someone else is profiting off of it without them profiting it. I live a privileged enough life, and I'm incredibly thankful that the way I am okay with sitting in a room that is no bigger than a dorm room, doing this all day, and feel a sense of contentment. I cannot empathize with individuals who both try to antagonistically have a conflict of interest as a sustainable relationship with the business and the creator. The business and the creator. Like, in both ways, in all ways, they favor conflict of interest bias towards self in order to solve the problem. I don't think that's the way. It's usually not the way, because the goated human condition is empathy. And there's no empathy, there very well lack of empathy, both for people who are directly involved in this type of thing, monetization, life goals and behaviors, how much money they need to sustain their creativity, all that, including the magnanimous or benevolent grandstanding commentators who think they understand this relationship. So I am a commentator who commentates on things I don't participate in. However, I would rarely, if ever, feel safe to portray like I know what is the right and wrong thing to do. The answer is you're always wrong because you didn't ask the person. You're speculating. You can be coincidentally correct, but that's not because of your experience, in my opinion. Any experience and commentary without true empathy is inherently incorrect or inaccurate, because empathy is something that pure empathy cannot be achieved without being telepathic, right? but it's a inevitable goal of interpersonal relationships. Even interpersonal relationships where it's not literal. Like, I'm not talking to this person, but I want to talk as if I understand this person from a distance. It's the closest thing I have to literally being a personal friend of that person. Business, this DMCA stuff, OS's relationship with performance, all that stuff. It's difficult for me to empathize. And it is because I have privileges. At least my family has worked to a point that I have these privileges. So I just wanted to make that acknowledgement so that it doesn't seem like I'm favoring the record labels or downplaying feature artists. I want to say that I think the world is rich and beautiful because all of these things exist. Because monetization exists through the interest of business holders and record labels. You know, because of that infrastructure, people did make money by creating music. And so like, it all exists. Now the goal is to continuously create higher and higher bottom lines. Like, if the bottom line is 30% satisfaction, let's go for 31%. Let's go for 32. It's never going to be 100, probably. Who knows? But let's just keep going higher. And that's kind of the thing. And that's why I have to say this, because I had reservations and I wanted to spend a year thinking about how I'm going to post these videos online on YouTube. How am I gonna explain to the OS community that I'm gonna inevitably encounter in the next 30 days or 31 days what my thoughts are on these things? Well, inherently, I have no thoughts on performance because I don't see it as a competitive process. That's one of the deep, like, hot takes. OS is a non-competitive game to me. I have no equal competition. And what I mean by that is, if you're gonna come and suggest to me that that ranking is fair, you're talking to the wrong person. The only way it would be fair is the pool only includes 100 copies of me in the current state. That is fairness. Ranking systems attempt to weigh to give you the appearance of fairness. So if you're well aware of that, you become more tolerant about what it actually represents, not necessarily what it isn't. So when you think about OS and your motivations, if rank and being compared to other people unfairly, but still striving for standardization is what motivates you, that's awesome. If you go to another person and show that they're clearly not doing that and asking them, how are you to get better? Like, well, you gotta think outside the box. And I'm an outside the box person. In this case, if it was like a dragon, like Ryu Gotoku Studios, I think I'm inside the box 60% of the time. So most people will be like, yeah, I'm on board. In OS, when I play OS, I am like 95% outside the box. So I cannot overstate enough that I will not represent the OS community unless there's a paradigm shift. But I absolutely love watching them. I love seeing plays being made. I love seeing PP records being broken. I love seeing Peppy just chilling and coding with such consistency. I love all that. I'm just not one of them. I wouldn't give up that either. So if someone is trying to convince me, but you can learn to do this, like, yeah, I know I can. That's not my concern. Generally speaking, one of the things that one of the like consequences of being specialized is it always seems feasible. So because it seems feasible to that person, they project an element of feasibility that projects their own goal. So when someone says, oh yeah, how's the grind? It's like, oh yeah, don't worry, you'll get better. Like, you'll just practice. Like, no, I won't get better in the way you think. I'm always getting better, just not in the way you are, right? And this is not a fair thing. I understand how you feel in a sense. I can sympathize with you being nice about it. But since your world, your specialization skills are inside OS and mine is outside of OS, as in it includes OS, I can understand you, but you can't understand me. And that's okay. Just it's the nature of being a generalized person, right? Anyways, one last thing, and I really want to do this thing. Speaking of appreciation, right? I want to do appreciation for the feature artists because they make the world go round and they make OS go round, right? They breathe life and color with their music. One other thing we have to note is that the difference between 1 year ago for tapping training is that I will be using OS laser. And I also want to acknowledge that Peppy & Co. as a slight plug, right? As a celebration of using freeware. Peppy has, in the last couple years, even like especially the last year, they've been making an incredible effort in trying to do a mobile launch, like a full mobile launch of OSU, as well as standardizing and making OS laser ranked play. It's actually quite a top priority recently. So that would mean that for all intents and purposes, OS laser beta is ending soon. Soon with the TM, right? Soon TM. Inside joke, right? Old school inside joke. Beta ending soon. TM. But I will be using the OS laser client because I would say the vast majority of its functionality is complete. There is an active GitHub roadmap, sort of roadmap. It's more like a list of things to do. And that list is looking quite complete. Although not all, we know that not all tasks are created equal. Some tasks will take an exponential amount of time compared to, but what it's suggesting, and they went out to say, is they're aiming for this. It's now a priority to finally, over 7+ years of development, make OS laser stable, and it's imminent. So this is one of the timings. This is why I'm doing it now, as well as a slight other plug. And I'm sure I will have to answer this question a bunch more time. But the last time I did OS was because of CTL CTL 472, the Wacom tablet. I am a tech enthusiast at arm's length. I do not get tech given to me to review. Maybe that's a thing that I would love to do, but I can't pursue that because it requires like business transactions and money and stuff. But when I can, I love to use the tools. And the last time was because of the Wacom CTL 472, which inherently went viral in a way. Viral in terms of the OS community, right? It's a cheap, affordable pen tablet that I still now use to this day for drawing, primarily for artwork actually. But it serves as a wonderful tool, and I really enjoy the product to be used for OS. So how is that related? Well, for a long while, and it goes without saying, I do keep in touch with technology and how it relates. Wu-Ting, I'm gonna say Wu-Ting because I like the way they emphasize the T. So Wu-Ting back in created splashes with the 60HE model, right? And specifically the rapid trigger stuff. Rapid trigger, the Lecker switches, right? I'm probably gonna write some of these incorrectly, but Lecker switches, etc. And without a doubt, it was a far gone conclusion that they were going to conceptualize some sort of keypad using this technology. And I told myself probably like 2 years ago when the 60HE went viral, in a very niche way again, and also it's attached to OS, that they were likely going to revisit. And it's kind of fun because I did a kind of a little down the rabbit hole thing following the I guess the founder, one of the founding members of Wu-Ting, or at least a representative, and watch them disclose the history of what ends up becoming the Wu-Ting Uwu keypad. And sure enough, about 2 years ago, I used the keypad that was made by an Etsy person when I first started OSU, like maybe a few months in, because I don't like going through whole keyboards, and I usually have I don't really play that vigorously to go through these things. So I had a keypad, and I've used this keypad for the longest time, like for a really long time, up to this day. It survived it, and I wanted to test something else out, and I really like the idea of this just new tech that maybe I could experience. Like, I don't necessarily have to experience it, but it did happen inevitably, because most of the time, a little weird flex, I suppose. In the background, I tend to invest in things, and a lot of times through all these like trial and error and understanding how business works, you kind of understand what kind of products would come out of like developers, right? And R&D and stuff. R&D, like what is a natural product, right? If you can perceive that the designers, the developers, the CEO, and the leadership recognize opportunity where it is, products tend to follow viral trends and whatnot. It's why it's so interesting to talk about developers and publishers and their motivations and where they go next. Because I would honestly say, if I were brought in as a consultant for like an indie company, there are various collective directions that one is likely to go consistently to be successful in the industry. So it's a combination of like understanding the audience, the end user, and your designers. So ultimately, going way back, let's take it back now. The Wu-Ting Uwu keypad happened, and it was very recently. So I got myself one, actually. I just set it up yesterday. It arrived on December 1st. Or actually November 30th, right in time for this video. So we're gonna go test it out. We're not gonna it's not an evaluation. I'm not a tech tuber, right? So tech tubers, right? I'm not that. I'm not gonna tell you to buy something or rate something or tell you feature sets voluntarily. Like, what I mean is voluntarily. It's not the goal. I will be able to answer questions about it. You know, I can answer questions when approached. And it's going to happen. But generally speaking, for better or for worse, since I already mentioned the US community as people who specialize in very specific things. One of them is not necessarily understanding how metrics work and how to evaluate things. It's generally intuition. So often when I answer questions, it's going to be in that manner. It's not analytical or very detail oriented. Generally speaking, the idea is to form faith and intuition. So contrary to what most may believe, I would imagine there is enough humility and self-awareness to understand from even the popular OS influencers that they are not technologically inclined and also not scientifically or objectively inclined enough to make true commentary on equipment. So they cater and very professionally and appropriately cater about talking about how they feel, and they make relative comparison, like how does the Wacom 472 like CTL 472 compare to the CTL 480 for them, and that creates a relatively reliable consistency. So if someone likes CTL 480, they are, or whatever the other tablet is, they would likely like the CTL 472 because to control for the relative, you use the same standard, like relative standard. And I don't have the luxury of doing that. So even then, I cannot provide that commentary. I went from a tablet that was 3D printed, lasted for on and off 3 to 4 years of OSU play from my arguably petite and delicate hands that do not apply a lot of force, to this thing. So the only thing I can tell you is it probably works really well. And I can tell you functionally what it can do. And usually recommendations, even those who like a personal favorite, shout out to, I don't know the guy's name, but the channel Podcastitch. I absolutely love this guy. You're incredibly analytically detail oriented, but in the end, when you see the concluding remarks and stuff, it's often through empathy. It's talking about what is this recommended to is towards the target audience. So the best idea is to find appropriateness to the target audience, and then what it isn't, like as much as they can. Not necessarily how good it is per se, like on a empirical level, it's how appropriate it is. So for me, if someone says like, would you recommend it, it's like, well, you're gonna have to explain what it recommends, right? Because if you need something for OS that isn't your keyboard, then this would be appropriate as any kind of thing. But this is a personal experience. So yes, I'm using a CTL 472 Wacom tablet as per the 2 or 3 year ago like breakout experience. And then now I am using the Uwu keypad by Wooting as per also the viral thing, just to appreciate and give shout outs to all the things that are going to be involved in this series. It's gone long because I have a long history with OS, and all of this is related to OS, but it is also related to my joy for technology. Like everything I'm saying is relevant, right? It's what motivates me to doing these things. So it's very great to establish opening remarks so that I don't necessarily have to, maybe in the future, repeat myself in a sense that I can't possibly explain how much I think about things. My motivations and my thoughts are incredibly deep. As in, I don't like living through moments of my life passively. So if you ask me a question, I have a long version, and the short version typically is intellectually disappointing, but trying very hard to be emotionally sympathetic. Rarely do I have an emotional connection with the vast majority of people that I talk to and interact with in my life. It's so difficult to establish an emotional connection because it is so bound by intellectual stimulation. So this is my way of truncating what I literally think about all the time into something a little bit more palpable, or like palatable. Sorry, that's the word I'm looking for. 2 hours is short. Constantly talking about complex interconnected correlations for 2 hours straight, that's pretty short. Can I get it shorter? Stay tuned, I suppose. Stay tuned, because there are shorter formats. How do I experience things? Well, now we're talking about days, right? How do I improve and create habits and projects? Now we're talking about months and years. I'm just on a different time scale. And we're not talking about because I'm slow. It's just because every moment has a lot of things. I might be slow at one thing, but when I'm doing one thing, I'm doing 10 things. It's not just one thing. I'm not just playing Osu. Like, I'm not playing us just for us. It's incredibly uncomfortable if I sit there and just do one thing involving the one thing. I want to know and track a lot of things about the one thing. I don't want to be a great mechanical tapper. That's kind of something I appreciate, that, you know, I can appreciate and find endearing about other people. I don't want to use the word waste time, because they probably devote all their energy to that one thing. To me, what makes me happy is that I can do a lot of things at once. So for the unfortunate person who interacts with me, the only thing I can truly say is, you have my divided attention. And that's saying it with the weirdest smirk and flex. You'll always... So here's the trade-off, right? You'll always have my divided attention. At least that is a silver lining for constantly having a divided attention. You will have enough of it. At least I try to. In contrast to someone who believes that humans who care about each other has to have undivided attention. Well, here's my rebuttal to that. A human being can't possibly sustain being undivided for a person, for a thing, for anything. At some point, they'll have to think about other things. I prefer a person who's able to manage that versus someone who believes that it's zeros and ones. So I like to believe it's like 0.2, 0.3, and the infinite number of numbers in between 0 and 1. Just as a little thing. Alright. So with that said, we're gonna have to cut the last segment I'm gonna do today. Alright, we're gonna hop in. It might seem like I talked for over 2.5 hours, because I did. It just shows you how many things I remember about Os. Os is incredibly... There's just so much more to talk about, but I'm just covering some of the topics. The little longer it is, it's kind of a reflection of how significant it is. Okay. Alright. Okay. So let's get in Okay.
Welcome to us.
Oh wait. I gotta get to the comp first. The whole music thing. Alright. So I set aside this. So we're only doing these two things. Like these three things from last year. And we're starting off very, very slow. So let's say we're gonna try to do 30 minutes and see where we go. But the idea is we're not going to do stretch goals. We're just gonna see where we stand at the retraining. So we're only gonna start with this. 120. People who know me have probably already seen this a bunch of times. But we'll see where it goes. The first day is like benchmark day most of the time. All right. Also new equipment and etc. Oops. I hit the wrong button. Oh, I know. My interference. I have two tablet drivers up at the same time. Wait, whoops. Okay. That felt like eternity. Oh my gosh, that's only 2 minutes? Oh my gosh. Ugh. Oh my gosh, that's so painful. Yikes. Oh no. There's so much tension. Okay. Yep. Man, the back of my forearm is still on fire a little bit. I definitely haven't done a lot with finger dexterity. Let's try this again. Now a little bit warmed up. Right. okay. I didn't burn as much. Still have like warm up, good warm up effects. I double tapped. My fingers are getting tied up. Fingers stuttered twice. It's my middle finger. Yeah, I did it again. So that wasn't really a stamina fail, it was just a dexterity fail. My middle finger just went down when it wasn't supposed to. I was like losing resolution as I was going. But no more burn. No more stamina burn. Just takes a bit. Oh. Interesting. Cool. I wasn't aware this was a thing. So what? Left side's early, right? Or it was right side early. Oh no, right side's early. Okay. I wonder if I have that appear this time. Oh no, I'm early. Left side's early. Yep. My finger keeps stuttering. Uh. Oh wait, I'm late now. Okay. Fingers keep stuttering. My middle finger stopped lifting already. Yep. Keeps dropping. Like stuttering so hard. Give it a little bit. guess the first task, the first goal now is to try to reduce the finger stuttering. Yeah, it's kind of like pausing here and there, not going back and forth. Probably gonna take like a day or two. Hey, hello. I'm doing pretty alright. How are you doing? What's on your mind? That's good to hear. We're in the process of slowly removing some finger stuttering between our middle finger and our pointer finger, our index finger right now. Just for the day though. How long have I been playing this game? Well, in terms of raw playtime, 2,000, 3,000 hours, something like that. On and off for 4 years. Been like 8 months though. We were playing other things for the last 8 months. double tap. Do I play Dead by Daylight? I do not play Dead by Daylight. Do you? Where am I from? I'm from the East Coast of the United States. From California? Nice, nice. What do you usually do on your free time? Sometimes play Dead by Daylight, yeah. I know someone that plays Dead by Daylight, sort of. I watched quite a bit of Dead by Daylight back in the day. But generally speaking, I play a lot of indie games. The vast majority of them are single player. We are currently playing a indie deck builder called Battle Bands, which I'm gonna do after this. And we recently played What Remains of Edith Finch, and before that, Alba, A Wildlife Adventure. We're currently also revisiting and finishing up a puzzler called A Monster's Expedition. And I play 2 live service games, Neverwinter Online and Phantasy Star Online 2 NGS. We are currently waiting on Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. In the year 2023, the last 8 months, I played all of the Like a Dragon games and Judgment. So Yakuza 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is 7. Judgment and Lost Judgment. And then we played just this past November Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name. And then Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth is coming out at the end of January. Yeah, so the English name is the Yakuza series. So Yakuza. But then recently, the name was changed to the Japanese name. So now both the English and the Japanese name are the same. And it's called Like a Dragon. And that's the series that I've been following for a while now. So I took a break from all of this, and I played every single Like a Dragon game. Took about 8 months. Do you have any games you're interested in that's coming out? No. What are you excited? Do you have anything you're excited about? That isn't necessarily video games. So do I stream every day when I'm playing games sometimes? Wait. I generally stream most days. Around 1 p.m. EST. So 11 a.m. PST. Or 10 a.m. PST. Sure. Maybe we can get our jitters out here. Oh, we haven't cleared this either. So clear the local scores from a year ago. You can do logos, banners, overlays, emotes, and everything related streaming. I'd like to see some of my work on Discord. Can you? I mean, my Discord link is actually in the descriptor, but I'll have to give you a fair disclaimer. I actually make all of that stuff too. Just so you know. Sure. Okay. It's a rather bold claim about liking them. That's interesting. Um, I do not know that URL, so I'm gonna have to check. Interesting. Huh. That's an interesting portal. Something new. Huh. All right. So let's click on this, I suppose. Uh, Seems you have a very particular niche. Uh, yeah, seems I say you cater to a specific type of client. Seems like you've done a lot of work. Do you usually approach OSU players? Sorry, but if I am being constructive from my personal taste, that type of thing, I can see where your fundamentals are. I don't think well, I'm kind of busy right now, so I won't be. You can leave a message or something, and I'll get to it when I get to it. Just, but not necessarily at this moment. But as far as your portfolio goes, I can see you have foundationally more or less mirrored a lot of common trends regarding asset generation, but I am a non-traditional digital artist, so I generally am looking for something incredibly different, like traditional ink paintings, abstraction. Not the vast majority of your artwork is incredibly Twitch oriented, I would say. Very game oriented, and it's quite it's a great place to start. Not quite the thing that would resonate with me. I'm not into that kind of thing. And emotes and stuff, as I've already mentioned, I make all of them. They are not to that type of foundational template working. Like took a gander of your portfolio. Perhaps it'll appeal to other people. That stuff is not. We don't have a resonance there. Yeah, it's better. I would say your target audience is probably a younger person. Someone who identifies as maybe a competitive person, like a competitive. I would say in their early 20s or maybe even in their late teens. Esports competence, I suppose. Someone who is specialized in just online activity, something like that. My own personal feedback about communication, I would probably say you're more than likely to have someone who are more resonant with you when you actually read their comment, like the stuff they place in the descriptor and stuff. For myself, I personally have done artwork beyond what you have done, so keep working at it, I suppose. But I don't share any commonality in artistic interest. So good luck with everything else. It's also worth mentioning that it's very common as well to approach people for artwork. It's a very common thing. I think it happens to someone who is doing something that is Japanese culturally related, so Japanese imagery like anime and manga. But you have to keep in mind that even to someone who's obscure and non-existent, right, like not doing this stuff, they get approached like 10 or 20 times a month, having a portfolio that is very similar. Just that whole gamery templated design, and then all the OCing, all the original creation stuff is very fundamentally new at the moment. So it requires some sort of identity, and that your portfolio doesn't stick out at the moment in my just cursory look. And I am not a person who's selling artwork or taking commissions or anything. So to me, it would be very, very encouraging to find out if the person you're approaching even does artwork in the first place. I would say this discussion that I'm saying now occurs almost twice a month, where I think you would be far more successful if you get to know the person first and also ask if they actually do artwork. I think you'll find that a lot of people do actually make the same things. It's a very common side hustle nowadays. Anyways, just a little side thought. I'm a very old person. I actually do not appeal to that stuff, contrary to what Os might suggest. But yeah, lots of anime inspiration stuff, but it doesn't stick out. Not very unique at the moment. So instead of talking about like competitive prices and whatnot, I think the portfolio has to be unique in some way. Just as a professional criticism. I guess the fortune favors the bold. But they definitely don't favor the foolish. and the ignorant. My mind is wandering about how it's incredibly classical how some individuals will find it to establish rapport is to legitimately suggest that they don't participate in anything the potential client does, and then expect them to love something or resonate or want something made. Kind of weird. Okay. Still can't get the stuttering out. Let's do a few more, and hopefully... Yeah, so it doesn't clear all local scores, interestingly enough. Just one at a time. separation by taps right now. Yeah, stamina is like non-existent. It only lasts for like 30 or 40 seconds. We're gonna have to work up from there. Fingers start double tapping, like it goes out of sync. Falls apart after the beginning. So I'm gonna do this a little. Whoops. That was okay. A lot better than when we started today. About an hour ago. Trying to feel some resolution. Fell apart after like 3 minutes. That's not too bad though. Yeah, my middle finger started stuttering after 3 minutes. Starting to subside a little bit. Oh man, can you delete individual ones? Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, I gotta remember to put no fail. Okay. It's coming back, sort of. Kind of falls apart the moment it starts tensing, and then my middle finger stop picking up. so much tension. I have to tap these switches a lot lighter. It's kind of like causing twitching a little bit. Probably 1 day's rest. Probably get used to it. I want to say it's like riding a bike, but I'm not so sure about that analogy right now. Yeah, it's like stuttering pretty crazy. We did about an hour. We'll try to keep it to an hour. Well, tomorrow, hopefully, get some rest. And then, you know, no remarks. So I'll go in a little bit mentally refreshed. You'll see if it quickly ramp up. It'll take about, I would say, a week till we get back to like 90%-ish. So we'll spend the first week just doing retraining. It's a good stopping point, like BA and then kinda last through the whole thing. Not too bad. Hopefully we can then do 140 tomorrow. It'll slow down to about 160 somewhere, 160, 170. That's probably where we'll get slightly comfortable at 180 and then we'll start doing some feature artist sections. Alright, well, that's a wrap for tapping retraining for day 1. And then we're gonna switch gears. Goodbye, us.
See you next time.
See ya next time.